What we've been left with over the last 200-300 years is, since the Enlightenment, is a stripping away of, superstition, religious thinking, etc., all of which is wonderful in many ways. But the flip side of that, a downside, is that we have lost touch with a lot of cultural myths and narratives that actually support us and hold us in important ways. So death, so particularly I think morbid superstitions have sort of, particularly sort of sniffed at. So death becomes one of those things that now there's no meaning, there's no narrative attached to it. So it just becomes scary and lonely and confusing for people when they're caught up in it or know someone that's caught up in it. The only narrative we sort of have around it is this idea of a brave battle that somebody is fighting. That's the kind of story that gets applied. Somebody was, brave battle. And all that does nothing to make the person who's dying feel any better. Much more likely just to make them feel worse. Makes everybody else feel a little more comfortable. And they're just obviously doing the best they can.
Right.
And
if I'm battling so bravely, why is this thing not going away?
Yeah, so now I've just got to add failure to my list of burdens. What we don't do is, we don't live with it. And the result is then that people often become like a sort of cameo part, somebody said, in their own deaths. That the main parts are going to the doctors and the loved ones and everyone else that's sort of making the decisions, and you might feel quite peripheral in your own death. And given that the life we lead is about the stories that we tell ourselves, and getting those stories right, sometimes recognizing them as just stories and living rather more in the present rather than in the middle of a narrative that's always going to be tied to things that have happened or things that are yet to come, that being a little more in the present is one helpful thing, but another thing that can be helpful is taking ownership of those kind of narratives, particularly when we come to that sort of final chapter. Understanding the importance of closure to those stories is important. If you watch a film or read a book, the last scene normally makes sense of what's come before. There's a climax, there's a sense of closure normally. This doesn't happen in life. It's just, it could just be absurd. It just ends. So you often, if you have the chance to forgive who needs forgiving, or to end the story in a way that needs ending. If you have that chance, that's something that should be encouraged and is, good for us, and also for the people around the person that's dying. Those things are important too. But the stories, we've sort of lost touch with those things that put meaning back into something like death.
Do you feel as if you can plan for it? Do you ever find yourself imagining what you will do when that time comes for you?
Yeah, I do. I've sort of found myself drawn. There was a lady who came to see my show in Canterbury called Deborah years ago, who was, she'd been a nurse and a psychotherapist, and she had really bad cancer. And
Not fun cancer?
Not fun cancer, that wasn't the good one, it was the bad one. And I was sort of on a bit like a bucket list for her, really. She wanted to come and say hello. So and then we kept in touch, we became friends, and I visited her, and we had a correspondence, and it led into the section of the book. In fact, if you've read the book, she's kind of the main character in that last bit, because it clearly is what she said and others have said, is that it can be the most vibrant and extraordinary bit of your life, because suddenly nothing has meaning unless it's finite, right? If we lived forever, we might like the idea for a second, but actually everything would very quickly become utterly meaningless and boring beyond measure.
How many Star Wars films do you need to see?
Exactly. Kafka said the meaning of life is that it ends.
Yeah.
So when things are ending very soon, everything explodes in terms of meaning and importance. And even Deborah said she wouldn't have swapped that. Her and her son. It was really just kind of the two of them, really, and the son's girlfriend was involved in this relationship sort of as well. The three of them were very close, but they both said, son and mother said, that they wouldn't have swapped that time for anything.
And she was able to appreciate it despite being gradually debilitated
absolutely.
and all the physical...
and in almost constant pain and, and the rest of it. So it was it's extraordinary lessons. And not that we need to live each day like it's our last. That doesn't make sense. But I think what it teaches us is, because I think ultimately why death is something that scares us, and this is deprivation. It's not that being dead's going to be horrible, because we won't be there to experience that. It's not that the idea of eternal blackness and infinity should be that scary, because we've already been there before we were born. That's happened, right? And it was fine then, and it'll be fine in the future. It's something.
That's not the scary part.
That's not the scary part. And even the bit of dying and the bit of all the pain, but that would only be, the dying bit's only scary if it leads to death. Otherwise, it isn't dying. So when you actually untangle what is it that we don't like, I think the answer is deprivation. That the projects we're involved in now, that people would like to see grow up, that are just going to end. The project just being ourselves and our opinions and our that thing that is unique to us, the view of the world, would just go. It'll just mean nothing. It'll mean nothing. It'll just be gone. That's the bit I think that is at the heart of why it's scary. So that does teach us to be a little less attached to our projects, a little less attached to what is yet to come, and root ourselves perhaps more in the present. But people fetishize the present moment at the same time. So I think it's being in the present, but with a contingent future. We are creatures that are going to move forward and often don't realise the value of the present until we look back on it and see it in hindsight. So that, again, that is part of the storytelling. That's part of being in a timeline.
Safe travel, Sam. You be careful, okay?